You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is October 19th, 2025, and this is episode 328 of Lighthearted. My co-host is a big-time lighthouse buff and the Associate Director of Events and Visitor Experiences at UMass Boston, Sarah McHugh. Correct me if I got that wrong, Sarah.
No, that's correct.
Hi, Sarah. How you doing?
Hi, Jeremy. I'm doing really well. I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's good to have you back. It's been a while. First of all, in a few minutes, we're going to hear a conversation with the author of a new book about a lighthouse family in Newfoundland, Canada. So, Sarah, again, you've co-hosted a few times in the past, and we've made some videos that are on the USLHS YouTube channel, but it has been a while. I think it's probably been, I would say, more than a year since you last co-hosted. So it's great to have you back.
Yeah, I think it's been at least a year, if not maybe a little bit more, but maybe it was around this time because I do remember we were doing maybe 2 years ago a Halloween spooky episode. So I'm really excited to be back.
We are speaking in the middle of October. People can hear this a few days from now. We're getting into late October. Summer's starting to feel it was like it was a long time ago. We've had some cool rainy weather lately. But how did your summer go?
I had a wonderful summer. I feel like I've been all over the place, mostly in the Northeast and New England. So I spent a lot of beach days and a lot of lighthouses. I saw some new ones this summer, so it's been really good. I spent a lot of time outside, which is all I can hope for in the summertime.
Yes. What new lighthouses did you see?
So I went up to Midcoast, Maine, which I'd driven through before, but hadn't gone out and checked out many of the lighthouses out there. So I did go to Pemaquid Point, which was really cool. Owl's Head, and one other. Oh gosh, why can't I remember now?
Marshall Point, maybe?
No, it was the Rockland Breakwater Light, actually.
Yeah. You walk out with Coda?
I did. Coda walked all the way out. If you wanna see him all the way out on that jetty, you can follow us on Instagram at Coda the Keeper. He was certainly all the way out there, and he did a good job on the jetty, which was a little scary at first, but we made it, so it was good.
I'll bet he enjoyed it. Yeah, I was looking at your Instagram actually, and I see this, it was a picture at Pemaquid Point as well. So I was happy to see you got there because those are some really great ones. Pemaquid Point is one of the most beautiful anywhere, I think.
It was really beautiful, and I was almost bummed. I went to go inside, and the keeper docent working there, had mentioned that because it was starting to get a little cloudy out, that they wouldn't let people up into the tower. But he told me I could be the last person to go up, because it was a little slippery because it was rainy out. But he still let me go up, which I was super grateful for, and the views at the top were just unbelievable. So
Yep. Did Coda go up?
he didn't. He didn't. He wasn't allowed up there.
Has he ever climbed a lighthouse?
He's not climbed a lighthouse. The only actual, like, lighthouse he's been inside of was the Absecon Lighthouse. So, not climbing up, but they do allow dogs in the museum area and, like, keeper's house area there.
Well, that would be really hard for. It's hard for anybody to climb. It's like 200 steps.
Yeah, that's true.
So, moving on here, we have a guest today who has written a book that relates to Newfoundland and Canada. Have you ever had a chance to see Atlantic Canada at all, Sarah?
I have not, but it is very near the top of my list of adventures and places to see for sure. I follow a lot of Instagram accounts of that area, and it just looks absolutely beautiful. So it's on my list.
Yeah. Well, I've been to a good part of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, but there's still a lot of Atlantic Canada, a lot of area I want to see. And I really, really, it's the top of my bucket list. Newfoundland is at the top of my bucket list. So before we introduce our guests, let's go over a few facts about Newfoundland. Now, you heard how I just said it, but if you didn't hear me just say it, how would you pronounce the name of the place?
Oh gosh, I think Newfoundland, just because of the dog breed is what I'm referring back to. Um, Looking at the word Newfoundland seems like it would make the most sense.
Well, yeah, I hear, and I used to say Newfoundland, like you said, and I know that is the way people tend to say the breed of dog, although people also say Newfie a lot. But Newfoundland is wrong. If you were to say that to somebody in Newfoundland, they'd be uh, very angry. The way people, well, I don't know if they'd be angry, but anyway, the way people there pronounce it is Newfoundland, or even a lot of them will put the accent on the last syllable, like Newfoundland, Newfoundland. You hear them say it like that a lot, and they can be pretty sensitive about it. So, I was actually looking at a funny video on YouTube. A young man explaining how to say it, and he showed a newspaper clipping about a man that actually shot and killed another man in 1876 because he pronounced Newfoundland wrong. So be careful. So can you help me out? You have some more info about Newfoundland?
I do have more info, but now I'm so nervous to say it wrong.
I don't think any of our listeners will shoot you.
Okay, I hope I'll try my best here. Newfoundland and Labrador is the easternmost province of Canada with an area of 156,453 square miles and about 550,000 people. The name Newfoundland goes back to the explorers John Cabot and his son Sebastian Cabot in the late 1400s and 1500s, who found a new land there. Much of the population is descended from English and Irish settlers. The capital is St. John's, which is home to about 40% of the province's population.
The province of Newfoundland and Labrador has about 80 historic lighthouses still standing. 23 of them still have resident keepers. The keepers at these stations provide weather updates, safety advice, and assistance to small boaters, fishermen, and pilots who find the local real time information invaluable. The light station we're talking about today is Point Verde, as they pronounce it, Verde, or Verde in French, Point Verde, near Placentia on the west coast of Newfoundland. It was automated and destaffed in the 1970s. Sarah, please help me tell our listeners about our guest.
Sure, Jeremy. Don Ladolcetta was raised on Long Island, New York, and grew up in a middle class Irish and Italian family. He met his wife Patty while he was in college in Florida, and they raised two boys together. After 22 years in banking and accounting, Don and his wife followed their kids and grandkids to Austin, Texas.
During the quiet months of the COVID pandemic in 2020, Don wrote his first book, Hannah, the Lighthouse Girl of Newfoundland. In the book, 9-year-old Hannah doesn't know what to expect when her family moves to an isolated lighthouse on the rugged Newfoundland coast. What she discovers is a life filled with adventure, wonder, and danger.
Facing everything from the fury of Mother Nature to illness, the Great Depression, and World War II, Hannah must find the strength to follow her dreams. When a stunning loss upends her world, Hannah decides to take a bold step along a new path.
In the tradition of Little House on the Prairie and Anne of Green Gables, this novel of a spirited girl growing into a strong woman is based on a true story. In fact, Hannah was Dawn's mother, and the book is inspired by true family lore and is sprinkled with cultural insights. Let's listen to my conversation with Dawn Ladolcetta now. I am here today speaking with Dawn Ladolcetta. We just discussed the pronunciation of your name, Dawn, and you said Ladolcetta is the proper Italian name, right? But
Correct.
okay, but Ladolcetta is kind of an anglicization of the name. Is that right?
Yeah, we put that name out a few years back, and we kept it.
Okay, well, we'll go with Ladolcetta. And Dawn is the author of a wonderful new book that I've just read called Hannah, the Lighthouse Girl of Newfoundland. And let me ask you another pronunciation question here. Am I saying it correct when I say Newfoundland?
Okay, in Newfoundland. Okay, it's like Newfoundland.
Yep,
Newfoundland. That's how they pronounce it. Newfoundland.
yep. And let's start with a little bit about you. I was reading that you worked as a banker and certified public accountant
Correct.
for quite a while. So what prompted you to start writing?
Well, back in the old days when I was in school, if you asked what kind of grades I was getting in English and literature, they were not my strong subjects. I always had good grades in school in general, but I was a math guy and a science guy, and grammar was just the last thing on my mind. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I never had that dream where a lot of guys, one day I'll write the greatest American novel. That was never in my plan.
Yeah.
But basically, we were home for COVID, and I was locked in the house, and I was extremely annoyed because, oh my God, I can't get out. I can't do anything. Oh my God. Well, and so I was moaning to my youngest son, Frank. He's 38 now, 37. And, of course, by phone, because we didn't visit each other. And he said, Dad, stop, stop. Why don't you just take all of Grandma's stories and put them in a book? Maybe you can write a book. Grandma told you lots of great stories. So that's what I did. I said, you know what? Let's see if I can do this. My mom used to talk about her childhood growing up at the lighthouse all the time. So, we call ourselves lighthouse people. That's been the trend, or I don't know what you would call it, but the theme of our family. So I said,
Mhm.
okay, I'll write. Now I can tell you the process that I went through for writing. I don't know if that's something you'd be interested in.
I would be, and let me just interject something here. I've written a number of nonfiction books, mainly about lighthouses. I tried at one point to write a novel, and I felt like I started kind of strong, but I'll tell you, the hardest part for me is writing good dialogue.
Oh, it's
Uh,
really. Oh, that's the crucial. That's a crucifying part of the whole book.
yeah, and you did a great job with it. I got to say, yeah, it's a real art to write dialogue that's both believable, realistic, but also advances the plot and advances the characters and everything. So you really did a good job with that,
Well,
I
say
gotta
thank
say.
you so much. I had an editor, a professional editor. Once I put the book together, which was very quick, I put the book together in about 2 months. And then I had an editor, and that editor tortured me for 10 months. So she said, "Oh, more dialogue, more dialogue." So I'd write a chapter and add more dialogue, hand it back to her. Okay, more emotion, more emotion. So I'd write more emotion, and good, chapter one is done. And then we would go back to chapter two, and 10 months of torture.
Hmm. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but obviously it came out for the best. It sounds like a good working relationship there, aside from the torture. So while you were starting to say about the process, did you take a writing class or anything like that?
No, I'm locked in the house. It's COVID time. I knew my
Yeah.
mother's stories. So I went to COVID and I said, how do you write a book? And COVID said, write about what you know, which is why I picked my mother's story. So I basically started off with 12. I asked Google. I said, Google, best-selling novels. How many chapters? And Google said 12 chapters. So 12.
Hmm.
So I wrote down a sentence. The first sentence was, Grandpa was a fisherman. Then I wrote down another sentence. Grandpa got a job at the lighthouse. Then I wrote a third sentence. There was a snowstorm. Uh, then I wrote a fourth sentence. There was a shipwreck. So then I wrote
Mm-hmm.
12 sentences. Then
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, I have 12 chapters, one sentence. How many words? And Google said, write 5,000 words about each of those sentences.
Hmm.
So I basically put 5,000 words down about Grandpa was a fisherman. And of course, these were stories from my mother, so I knew what to talk about. And
Yeah.
finished that chapter, moved on to the next chapter, moved on, did all 12 chapters, handed it to my editor, and she said, no, 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 24 chapters. So she chopped up my book from 12 to somewhere close to 24 chapters. And that's how I wrote the book. I used Google because I really didn't have any other resources. And I used the editor to correct my grammar and dialogue and emotions and stuff like that.
Yeah. I might have to take some of that advice and go back and look at my novel again
There you
that I
go.
put on the back shelf about 10 years ago. But you're inspiring me.
Thank you.
Uh, so it sounds like you really had before the Hannah book, Hannah, the Lighthouse Girl of Newfoundland, and your book, A Brooklyn Tale, which I want to touch on before we're done. Before that, you hadn't written any other fiction, is that right?
No, sir. Just did a lot of business writing, being an accountant, a lot
Yeah.
of writing, but that was it.
Yeah. Did you have any particular influences in your writing, do you think? Other writing?
Well, my mom, um, I used to call her a newfie, but I have a lot of relatives who don't like that word. Okay. So when you talk to newfies, they get very offended. It's like at the N word, or So my mom was a newfie, but I'll call her that because to me it's a loving term. Uh, just all the things that she used to. She had a great affection for family and a great affection for her home country.
Yeah.
That was my influence.
Yeah. That comes through for sure. But I was also wondering about there other authors that might have influenced your style, that kind
Well,
of thing.
actually, I am a big fan of James Michener. Okay,
Ah,
and his kind of writing is when he tells a story, and they are stories. He doesn't just hand you, Mary and Jane got married and they had children. He says Mary and Jane lived in Hawaii, and here's the story of Hawaii. It was a volcano, and then these guys swam over there on boats, and they
yeah.
developed. And he tells the whole story, the history behind it. So I like James Michener, and so my book, when when I put my book together, I wanted to make sure all that Newfoundland history and background and culture got embedded. If you want, I can tell you that I have here as an American, I probably have the largest library in the States of Newfoundland literature.
Hmm.
Every time I go up there, I buy a book, buy a book, buy a book, buy a book. So I have this big long shelf. There's not a lot of Newfoundland literature out there, by the way. There's enough, but not
Yeah.
plenty. And
Yeah.
so I read research. I did research. Okay, yeah, I knew my mom's story. How do I supplement it? And so I would go back to the books and say, what kind of thing happened? What kind of environment was going on in this time frame of my mother's life? And that kind of stuff got added into my story.
Well, that's interesting. Mitchner is an interesting comparison because it's historical fiction, but also the characters are a way of drawing you into learning about the history and culture of an
Absolutely.
area, which is
But just about every one of those characters in the book, there's one person in there who was an evil son of a gun who caused troubles and grief.
yeah.
And so I changed his name, but everybody else's name was real.
Right. Yeah, I want to get back to that in a little while, but a couple of basics here. You've kind of set up, and I'm not sure for listeners who don't know, I'm not sure we've said it real clearly yet. So again, the name of the book is Hannah, the Lighthouse Girl of Newfoundland. It's a novel, basically, but it's also, as you just said, largely based on fact. So who was the real person who inspired Hannah? Again, I think you've already said it, but I just want to make sure we
Hannah is
establish that.
okay. My mother's name, she was christened Johanna.
Yeah,
She hated that name. When she
yeah,
was little, everybody called her Hannah, but even then she didn't like it. As she grew older, she changed it to Joan. So the inspiration of the story is Hannah, my mom, who I knew as Joan when I was growing up.
yeah, yeah. So why did you decide to call the book Hannah and not Joan?
Because she didn't change her name until she was in high school.
Hmm.
She went by Hannah, and I thought Hannah was a more kind of an appropriate name for a Newfoundland girl.
Yeah, well, it certainly fits. So how many siblings did your mother have? And part two of that question is, were any family members still around to kind of
Yes.
help you through the book?
Okay, so there were nine brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Um, Now, of the nine brothers and sisters, eight of them, including my mother, had passed away when I put the book together. The
Hmm.
youngest child was my Aunt Angela, the youngest. She was still alive, and she was actually a source for me. And I would pick up the phone. She was kind of like she died, 2 years ago at age 90. So I would pick up the phone. Hi, Aunt Angela, how you doing? I need some help with Mom's story. Can you tell me a little bit about this, or a little bit about that? And so she corrected me on a few things, or gave me good direction on a few things, and helped me out a lot. I did have many, many, many cousins, children of the brothers and sisters, if you will, and I probably should have talked more with them. Okay,
Hmm.
I did talk to some of them, but the oldest child, the oldest sister of my mom's, Aunt Mary, had a daughter named Cousin Mary, who's still alive, and she didn't, and I didn't communicate about the book until after the book was printed. And
Hmm.
I sent her a copy. She was mad as a hatter. You can't tell me that you put this in this book. I can't believe it's full of baloney. It's full of baloney. She was a little
Yeah,
upset. But
yeah. Well,
the inspiration came from a few cousins, and my Aunt Angela and my mother.
yeah. It's great that Angela was able to be part of it.
God bless her.
Uh, yeah. So we've been talking a bit about the culture there in Newfoundland, and one of the things you included in the opening of the book is a glossary, which I found very interesting. So it seems almost like Newfoundlanders have a language of their own. Would you say?
Oh, they have all kinds of crazy words. Uh, you know, for instance, they don't call it when you see water in the ocean coming up in a wave. They don't call them waves. They call them lops. Um, I can read some of the words to you, but in my head, all of a sudden, it's not coming to me. But they speak English. They have an Irish accent.
Yeah.
Um, but for some reason, because they were like an isolated island, there wasn't a lot of interaction with the rest of the world. They created their own slang. Let's say 30% of the Newfoundland books that you buy have glossaries in front of them because there are so many strange words coming out of the people there that live there. Even to this day,
Hmm.
when I talk to my cousin, they'll pop out a word and say, "What? What is that word?" And they have to explain it to me. So
Yeah. Yeah. I've spoken on the phone with a couple of ex-lighthouse keepers in Newfoundland, and I found the accent fascinating. It was kind of Irish, but kind of different.
fun to talk with them.
It is, yeah, yeah. I remember one I had a great conversation with. It told me a very interesting ghost story about his lighthouse. But I'll save that for a Halloween edition of the
Okay,
podcast. Yeah. Another thing, early in the book, you talk about the story of Michael Green, a ship captain, an
correct.
ancestor of Hannah. So that's, I assume, based on real research that you did.
Ancestors of mine owned a schooner, and they were using Newfoundland as a base for their operation, and they sold the schooner so they could. Well, they were traveling back and forth and many visits to the United States. They sold the schooner. They kind of got fed up with the American Revolution and decided they weren't going to be dealing with them anymore, and took the money from the schooner and bought land. And that's a true story.
Yeah.
They bought the land. They were squatting on Point Verde, um,
Right.
fishing and doing work at Point Verde illegally, if you will, because the French didn't want them there. They didn't buy the land, but when the schooner was sold, they used that money to take legal title to the place that they had been squatting on.
Yeah, so you just mentioned Point Verde, the name of the lighthouse where your
Right.
mother's father was keeper. Uh, I wasn't sure how to pronounce that. We talked about it before we started here, and of course it's from French, verde, green. So the name word the verde or verde came from the family Green, which is really
Correct.
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You included so much detail of life, day-to-day life in Newfoundland. I just really enjoyed that. Stuff about the details of fishing and how the fishermen earned a living, not so great a living, and that kind of thing. The schoolhouse Hannah attended, the church, and so forth. A lot of fine detail. So you say you've got a big library of Newfoundland literature, but a lot of that detail had to also come from your Aunt Angela or your mother, stories your mother told you.
that's
Uh,
correct.
yeah.
And I visited Newfoundland many times,
Hmm.
even recently.
And well, let me clarify. You live in Austin, Texas, but I believe you grew up in Long Island, New York. Is that right?
My dad, was an Italian. His family settled in New York after they came from Italy.
Hmm.
And my mother, after the in World War II, they got very. If the book will tell you about it, but she got very used to American servicemen in Newfoundland. And after the war was over, she felt the appeal. Gee, the American men are somebody I should marry. And when the base shrunk and the war ended, she came to America, Brooklyn, where my dad was, met and married him. And of course, they went out to the suburbs on Long Island, where
Yeah.
I was born and raised.
Back to the details of the book, the details of day-to-day life. One of the parts I really enjoyed was the description of a kitchen party uh, where lots of musicians play kind of traditional music and people dance and sing and that kind of thing. And I spent some time in Quebec. I had a roommate many years ago who was from Trois-Rivières in Quebec, and I went up there for a week and we stayed with his grandmother, and we went to a kitchen party. And it was so
Fantastic.
much like what you described. Again, this was French people in Quebec, but it seems to maybe it's a kind of Atlantic Canada tradition, do you think? Or-
Absolutely. If you'll find that even though there's very few French in Newfoundland right now, the idea of maritime life it's spread around. I mean, the Maritimes. There's a number of provinces called the Maritimes. Nova Scotia being one of them. New Brunswick being another. Um, they all have a similar background and lifestyle. Kitchen
Mhm.
parties are a gas. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
I've been to some. They're a lot of fun. Sometimes you can call it a shed party because Some of the guys who have a man cave out back, they'll have their kitchen party, but they'll call it a shed party. But either way, you go out to the shed and 25 people show up and you dance and sing. It's great stuff.
Yeah, it really brought back memories. That was a really fun night when we went to that kitchen party. My old roommate who was from there, Claude, played spoons, on
Oh
his
yeah,
legs. So he added some percussion to
I
the
probably have ones in
proceedings.
this house somewhere. I have a thing here, a musical instrument from Newfoundland called an ugly stick. It's in the next room. If you want, I'll get it. It's a traditional weird instrument that they play in the kitchen party. I've got one made for when I do book presentations.
Yeah, yeah, you mentioned that in the book. I found that amusing. I didn't recognize the name, although Ugly Stick, I think I've heard in other contexts. But as far as the instrument goes, I think I can kind of picture it. I think maybe I've seen them, but not referred to by that name. But
I'd be
yeah,
glad to share it with you if you want, but that's up to you.
okay. Well, our listeners won't be able to
Of
see it,
course.
but I find it absolutely fascinating. So I enjoyed the kitchen party in the book. So let's go back to Point Verde, where your mother and grandfather lived. So that is the actual place where he was a keeper, your grandfather, and he was there for a long time. It was like 25 years or something like that.
Many years, and then when he got sick and died, my uncle Leonard, which was the oldest of his boys, took
Yeah.
over the role of lighthouse keeper. And so I never met my grandfather. He was passed away long before I was born. But Uncle Leonard, I've known for years, and so we would go to Newfoundland. We would go back to the lighthouse and hang out with him. So I've been
Hmm.
inside the lighthouse, and when the foghorn went off, it was just terrible loud, etc. It was pretty interesting visits to go back home.
I was looking at the list of keepers, and I think there's another Green after Leonard. Was that another member of the family?
Yes, Newfoundland and Point Verde, as well as Placentia, small villages,
Yep.
and everybody married everybody else, if you will. My grandparents, my grandfather who ran the lighthouse, married a Green. So his last name was Green, and his wife's last name was Green. Um,
Okay.
my Aunt Bridie married a Ben Green. So there's two people with last names. So there were Greens. First of all, Point Verde was Green Point. It was where
Yep.
the Greens came from. There were tons, well, I wouldn't say tons, let's say 80 Greens living in that area. So, yeah, so the other people who you saw that were there were related. Any Green that came from there were related. There were some other lighthouse keepers there who were not Greens. I don't remember the names, but you could look
Yeah.
that up.
Well, obviously, it's appropriate that Point Verde would have Greens so
There you go.
entwined in its history. Uh, so you mentioned before that your mother would tell you stories of her early life at the lighthouse pretty often, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not, no, I don't think I mentioned in the book, a fellow named Soggy Green. Did I mention Soggy Green in the book?
you do. Yeah,
Oh, okay. So she used to talk about Soggy Green. He was the boy that everybody picked on because
right.
his family was super poor and he dressed in poor clothes and so when he comes walking around the corner, he looked very soggy. So she used to tell a lot of stories about Soggy Green.
Yeah. I enjoyed that part of the book. Is your mother's mother actually says something about be nice to that boy because it sounded like they were
Oh, that's
picking
right.
on her
You
on him.
forgive
Yeah.
me. I'm getting old. I forgot that part. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed that. You know what it reminded me of was To Kill a Mockingbird.
Uh-huh.
Atticus Finch would be so wise talking to his kids, and I just that's the sort of thing he might say to one of his kids. You
Absolutely.
walk a mile in his shoes or whatever. Be nice to him.
Absolutely. Very
Yeah.
poor. He used to, one of the things she told me, I don't think this was in the book, he used to keep, his zippers were always broken because they didn't have the money to buy new pants. And so they always use safety pins to keep his fly closed.
No, I don't. That's not in the book. Although
I don't think so.
be if you do a new edition at some point, I think that should go in there.
Okay.
Another fascinating part that's kind of woven into this was a common belief in fairies
Yes.
around there. Yeah.
My mother believed in fairies. And the reason she believed in fairies, it was because the parents were trying to protect the children from doing stupid stuff. So
Hmm.
if you scared the children with the stories of fairies, you could scare them so they wouldn't do certain behaviors. And
Yeah.
two of the things that the parents didn't want were they didn't want the children wandering off the cliff Okay, and they didn't want the children to wander too far into the woods. So they would tell stories about fairies living at the bottom of the cliff and
Uh-huh.
fairies living deep into the woods. And so there was constant reminders. And of course, it got embedded into my mother. She truly believed in it. In fact, even as an older woman, the fairy stuff never left her. In
Yeah.
her mind, she would, and I, God bless her, she's now passed away, and I love her dearly. But she would kind of see ghosts in the house,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
phantoms, or whatever you want to call it. And she would
Yeah.
say, "Oh, Johnny came back last night." What? Yeah, Johnny was here last night. He was walking down the hall last. Really, Mom? You serious?
Mm.
Yeah, Johnny was here. So she saw fairies in her old age. He
Yeah.
gave him a name.
Interesting. Well, it's fascinating. I don't know how deeply we want to get into the subject, but the beliefs in little people, whether it's fairies or elves or whatever it might be, it's pretty common throughout various cultures.
Well, it's an
So,
Irish thing, I think.
yeah, well, leprechauns, yeah, yeah. But so it almost makes you think maybe there's something to it. I'm not saying that there's really fairies, but it's interesting that people think of fairies, often they think of something like Tinkerbell, like a nice little spirit or whatever. But in the context of this book, and what your mother grew up with, it was more like nasty little old men.
Well, there was a relative in the book who was, called away by the fairies and disappeared for a period of time, and when he came back, he kind of became less of a his mentality, his mind
Yeah,
impacted, and he used to stare at dust particles floating in the air, because that's, his mind left him somehow or other. Maybe
yeah.
maybe he fell down and conked his head, but they blamed the fairies.
Yeah, well, I think it said a couple of times in the book that the he was touched by the fairies.
Yes.
So let me ask you kind of a general question here. Do you think your mother and her family felt that there was something special about living at a lighthouse, or was it just kind of matter of fact?
My mother was so proud of being member. Now, here's the interesting thing. When they were fishermen, they were poor, 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 poor,
Yep.
barely putting food on the table. And all of their neighbors in this small village of Point Verde were poor, poor, poor. Well, Point Verde is kind of an interesting place too, and I'll get to that in a minute. But they were super poor, and the minute that Grandpa Green got his job at the lighthouse, um, he got, number one, a salary. Number two, a house with no rent. Number three, the electricity and all that was paid for. He had no
Yeah.
expenses. Number four, they gave him cows and sheeps and let him farm the lighthouse land. So
Mm-hmm.
suddenly he was the richest man in town. Okay,
Right.
there was no one with more money than him, and so mom would go to school, mom would go to church. She'd have nice new clothes on, uh,
Yeah.
and the people like Soggy Green would be walking around, barely had any food to eat. In fact, her
Yeah.
cousin Winnie used to get leftovers from my mother just to stay alive. So her position and perspective, God, it's great to be at the lighthouse. And, it was a warm, cozy house. It was nice and roomy. They had indoor plumbing, which no one else had. So the idea of being a lighthouse, it was a proud experience for my mom. Proud, proud, proud.
Yeah. Talk about the clothes. They finally had better clothes to wear. I remember in the early part of the book, you described your mother had a dress made of flour sacks, I believe.
Correct. Yes, the back in the day, the flour companies would, knowing that the people would use the flour sacks for dress and clothing material, they would put little patterns on the flour sacks, knowing someone would use them. So the women would cut up the flour sacks and turn them into dresses and pants and stuff.
So when you talk about how excited they were to, when he became a lighthouse keeper, they moved into the house that had relatively modern conveniences. It reminds me so much of my late friend Simon Ponsart Roberts, with whom I wrote a book called Everyday Heroes: True Story of a Lighthouse Family, and she talked about moving into when they switched lighthouses in the Cape Cod area to one on Martha's Vineyard called West Chop that had modern plumbing for the first time. And she was so excited as a little girl, running up and down the stairs and flushing the toilets and running the water. It was like the most amazing thing ever.
I have an interesting story about Point Verde. Point Verde is actually both an island and a village.
Yeah.
Okay. So the village had, 100, 200 fishermen. and then you left that village and you crossed a little land bridge to an island where the lighthouse was. And it's a sizable island, let's say a mile by a mile in size. And my mother and her family were the only ones living on this 1 mile by 1 mile island. They call that Point Verde the island, but they also call the village Point Verde. So there's actually two places. Point Verde is actually two places. So my mother used to tell me stories about before they moved to the lighthouse, before they had indoor plumbing, they would have to get their water from the pond out in the back of the house. Little creek would run by the house. And she, oh, the water was so fresh. The water was so good. I would love to go out there and get the water. She would tell me this. And so when I went back to Newfoundland in the year 2012, the lighthouse is gone now. But I went to Point Verde because I wanted to see if I could track down her original homestead before the lighthouse. And so I asked the cousin where to go, and they gave me the good directions. And I arrived at the place, and I found the little creek that she used to brag about. And
Mm.
so I went down to the little creek, and I said, I'm going to do the same thing and scoop up the water from the little creek like my mom did because she was so proud and happy about that. And I drank from the little creek. Then, when the day was over, I went back to my cousin's house. What'd you do today? I said, oh, I went out to the Point Verde lighthouse and I scooped up the water from the creek out behind where mom used to live and drank from it just like she did as a little girl. I can't wait to go home and tell her about that. My cousin's, oh my God. Oh my God. I can't believe you did that. Why? What's wrong, Jeff? What's wrong? Didn't you see the outhouses up that creek? There's
Oh,
like 4 or 5 outhouses. All those outhouses are going into that water that you drank. So
well,
luckily I didn't get sick, but I could
yeah.
have because I was drinking outhouse water.
Yeah, but hopefully it was flowing fast enough so it kind of flushed it out, so to
Now,
speak.
I wouldn't do it again though, if you want to know the truth.
Well, I wouldn't blame you. I don't think after you tell me if I ever go there, which I probably won't, I'll be sure not to drink from that
There
creek.
you go.
Yeah. Let me ask you, the book is certainly, I would never call it a children's book, and I don't know if it's necessarily intended as a young adults novel kind of thing, but it does seem like it could be enjoyed by younger people. Depending on how mature they are, maybe as young as 12, maybe even younger. But was
Very
that
much
something
so.
that was your intention when you wrote it?
No, I was trying to do Little House on the Prairie kind of thing, which is a everybody book.
Right.
But I will tell you that my 9-year-old grandson read this book in 3 days, and he thought it was the cat's meow. In fact, he came back after reading the book. My son said, "Dad, you won't believe what's going on around here." I said, "What's going on?" After Cody read the book, you know what he's been doing? Running around the house. I said, "What?" He runs around the house and he screams, "Lard, thunder, and Jesus! Lard, thunder, and Jesus!" Well, that was a phrase in the book. When you got excited and mad in or upset in Newfoundland, you wouldn't say Jesus, Mary, and Joseph like someone else might. Might say Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. They would say Lord, thundering Jesus, which was Lord, thundering Jesus. It's their slang for Lord. And my grandson started running around always Lord, thundering Jesus, Lord. So
Yeah.
he read the book, 9-year-old grandson, and he loved it. He thought it was a great book.
That's great. I mean, there's death, there's hardship in it of various kinds, but kids have to be introduced to those concepts, anyway. And some children's books for younger kids have some of those
Absolutely.
themes as well. But yeah, when you say it's an everybody book, I think
Yes.
that's accurate. It seems to me.
I think most of my audience are adults, most of them, but
Yeah,
I wouldn't have any concern about a child reading it. They would probably enjoy it.
I agree with you. I mean, certainly they see stuff on TV every day
Oh
that's
my God.
more adult than
Oh
than
my
this
God.
by far. So there's a part in the book where a Nazi gets a shave and a haircut, I believe, from one
Okay.
of your mother's brothers.
Uncle Gus.
Yeah, and was that based on truth?
Okay. Well, here's the story. I got that, I talk to cousins, talk to them all the time. I got that story from one cousin. Okay. And I took it to be truth and I put it in the book. And
Mm-hmm.
then about 2 or 3 months later, another cousin turned around and said, that didn't happen. And so, but I said, cousin Jeff said it did happen. That didn't happen. So on the basis of that, cousin Jeff tells me it happened. I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to believe it. The other cousin Gerard, he says no way. So,
Yeah.
of course, it happened 50 years ago, 60, 40, 70 years ago, whatever. So really no way to find out for certain. So I'm going to go with cousin Jeff's truth.
Well, it's a good story. Well, that's like 1940, I believe, when that's supposed to have happened
Correct.
in the book.
Before we were all at war.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember when I talked with one of those ex-lighthouse keepers in Newfoundland, he claimed that during the war there were Nazis landing there and doing almost like psychological warfare, doing things to let people know they're around. I don't know if you've heard things like that, but
I know that there was a lot of submarines that would put things out there that helped guide, like navigational radio things. They would leave on a little island or a little rock that was in the ocean to send out signals so that submarines and other boats would be steered around. But
yeah,
there was I don't know if you remember the part about the lighthouse where they actually painted the lighthouse in camouflage out of
yeah,
fear of Nazis seeing the lighthouse at the
yeah,
wrong moment and using it to their advantage.
yeah. And the light was actually turned off during the war, wasn't it?
The light was pretty much turned off except when instructed. So
Mm-hmm.
rather than, typically the lighthouse would run, at night and it would run during fog. But the government would give instructions and say, don't run your lighthouse tonight. Run it tomorrow between the hours of X and 10 and 12. And so
Yeah.
it was not on very often.
Pretty much the same on the east coast of the U.S., where
Yeah.
most of the lights were turned off during the war. Same on the west coast because of Japanese
But
submarines, possibly.
but there was
Yeah.
a naval base quite near, and
Mm-hmm.
so on occasion he was told, "Light it up."
Mm-hmm. So you've mentioned that you've gone to Newfoundland many times and you've visited the site, or it's still Point Verde light station is still there. Clarify for me. I think the lighthouse tower that had been there has been replaced by a more modern skeletal tower. Is
Very,
that correct?
very sad and depressing to go. I've been there a few times.
Yeah.
Basically, the houses and the actual beautiful light. By the way, you can see this is what the lighthouse looked like here. I made
Yeah.
that model. Uh,
For our listeners who can't see that, if they're listening to the podcast, yeah, it's a nice model behind you with the red and white striped. Well, it's not. I wouldn't call it striped. It's a white lighthouse with the red band. I guess you would
there
describe
you
it
go.
as. Yeah.
Anyway, the government found that computerized lighthouses were cheaper to go, so
Yeah.
they bulldozed the old lighthouses and they replaced it. In the current spot, there is a scaffolding tower. Let's say a 30-foot scaffold with a light at the top of the scaffold, and then a foghorn at the bottom of the scaffold, and the
Yeah.
whole thing is run by computer and satellite from long distance. So it's a very depressing place that I used to go to as a child, which is a happy place. You go back now and it's very sterile, very
Yeah.
empty.
Well, that's too bad. But when you visit there, aside from that, if you're not thinking too much about that, I imagine you have other emotions when you visit that place.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, as a child, mom wanted to visit her family. So every summer, not every summer, but many summers, we would hop in a plane or even take the ferry to Newfoundland and hang out with all the cousins and stuff. We did that a number of times. So
Mm-hmm.
so many of those people have passed away. So it's a very emotional thing for me to go back and visit. I love the culture of Newfoundland, and the people of Newfoundland are just such jolly, happy, sweet people. So when you go there, it's nothing but a good time. So I go there, I
Yeah.
get a little sad because I miss the people that have passed.
I've never visited Newfoundland, and I've always wanted to, and you are making me feel even more that way. Like I need to. It's got to be at the top of my bucket list at this point.
It's
Yeah.
gorgeous. There's 500,000 people living on this big island the size of the state of New York. So there's huge areas of wide open space, green fields, rocky cliffs, beautiful, gorgeous. Very much reminds me of Ireland. Very much reminds me of Ireland,
Yeah.
and uh, and the people themselves, because there's not a lot of people around. When you walk into someone's store, to buy a cup of coffee, they want to talk with you. The people are just so kind and so sweet. It's a great place to visit, and they have this lovely Irish accent. You feel like you're in Ireland when you're walking around. At
Yeah.
least I do.
I went to Ireland on a U.S. Lighthouse Society tour in 2022 for almost a month, so I loved Ireland. And would you say that the similarity is part of why so many Irish people settled in Newfoundland? There's the physical similarity.
Well, they were the people that moved there, the people, the Irish, the descendants there. were forced to live there back in the days of the strong British Empire. Um,
Right.
the British sailors needed protein, and so there was so much codfish off the coast of Newfoundland that all they needed to do, the British Navy, was to get somebody to bring those codfish home. They would
Mhm.
Shanghai the Irish in Ireland, drag them over there to Newfoundland and say, go
Yeah.
fish. So the reason that there's so many Irish there is they're like descendants of the people who were Shanghai.
Uh-huh.
And because it
But
was not a lot of people, they kept their Irish accent, they
yeah.
kept Irish customs.
You mentioned, you just said there's about a half a million, not a half, yeah, about a half a million, about 500,000 people. Is that right
Right.
in
Yes,
Newfoundland?
yes.
But I think you said when your mother was a girl, there was something like 18,000 people. Is that, am I
Well,
remembering that right?
if I wrote that in the book, that's probably true, but I guess I forget some facts. So yeah, I would, if that number's in the book, and let's say it is, because you
Yeah.
read the book, I would say that's an absolute fact. I did the research for that.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing it's grown that much since then.
Yeah,
But the big percentage of the population's in St. John's, right?
correct. And Placentia, which is the town just outside of Point Ferry, that used to be the capital of Newfoundland when the French were running things.
Back to visiting the site there and everything, Point Verde, you mentioned the idea of a memorial to your grandfather, that
Yeah,
possibility at the location
yeah,
of the lighthouse. Is that
yeah.
maybe going to happen,
There's,
you think?
there's a few cousins
Mm-hmm.
who I have many cousins who still live up there, and there's a few cousins who go there like twice a year with their shovels and their bags of dirt and their plants and flowers, and they have created a memorial and they keep building on it. So it's been a small memorial, but getting bigger with each year that passes.
Before we close up shop here today, let me ask you about your other book, A Brooklyn
Okay,
Tale.
great.
Just if you give me the Cliff's Notes version, what's that about?
Okay. So I would go to present my book at a book presentation, and people say, "What's your next book? What's your next book? What's your next book?" They pushed me into writing another book. And I said, "Well, if I wrote the first book about my mother, perhaps I should write the second book about my father's family." So my ancestors on my father's side, they were in Sicily and the southern toe of Italy in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and Italy had a very hard time financially, and they suffered through a lot of troubles because of the earthquakes, and there was famine and all kinds of stuff. So many, many, many Italians left Italy, got on a boat, came to America through Ellis Island. You all know the Ellis Island story. A lot of them settled in Brooklyn. So my Italian ancestors, my grandfather, my great grandfather, all those people came to Brooklyn to find the American dream, and they lived in the Italian ghettos, the tenements, and
Yeah.
struggled, and they had to deal with all the issues of a new immigrant into America. They were despised, spit upon. They were not liked. The Catholics were not liked. They were despised and spit upon and treated very poorly. They had a big struggle, and it's the
Yeah.
story of how they survived with all this and thrived and eventually found the American dream. There's a
Yeah.
little bit of mafia stuff going on in there
Huh. Well,
because
of course, I can't help but thinking of Godfather 2 with a young Vito Corleone going through
I
Ellis
have one
Island.
great mafia story about that if you want to hear about it.
Sure.
Okay, so Grandpa Ladolcetta borrowed money to open up a candy store and lunch counter.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and back those days, there weren't too many people to borrow money from, and he borrowed it from the local gangster. And he got a very favorable loan terms. In exchange, he had to return the favor. Now,
Uh-huh.
what was the favor? This was during the days of speakeasies and prohibition when you couldn't serve alcohol in bars.
Mm-hmm.
So this particular gangster lender had a speakeasy in the alley behind my grandfather's candy store. So there was no other way to get to the speakeasy except through the front door of my grandpa's candy store. They would walk to the back door and then down the alley, and they would have a speakeasy night. So grandpa was forced to keep his doors open very late at night so that speakeasy customers could come and go, and at the same time, Grandpa was required to feed the cops on the beat, the local cops. He would have to feed them sandwiches and coffee. And they would sit there on the lunch counter stools while all these people went back and forth to the speakeasy behind the store. So,
Mm.
that was the extent of my family's Italian connection, but they
Yeah.
were in that situation at that time.
by bringing up Godfather 2, I don't mean to imply that everybody, all the Italians coming over at that time, got into that kind of world, but
Oh, absolutely
a
not.
lot
But
of them had to have some contact with that part of things, I would think.
everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew who was the bad guys, and they, you just had to live with it. You had to
Yeah,
look. That's so and so, and you had to live with it.
yeah. Well, I look forward to reading a Brooklyn Tale. Let me ask you, what's your next book?
Oh, well, I just finished the Brooklyn Tale only 3 or 4 weeks ago,
Oh,
which is
okay.
why you found me writing to you because I was looking for ways to spread the word. So right now, there's no books in my head. But I don't say that's not going to happen. I just finished the Brooklyn Tale. That was an effort that took a lot out of me. So right now, I'm
Sure.
just taking a big breath, going, it's
Yeah,
finally,
I
it's
can
finally
imagine.
done. It's finally done. And it's being well received. It's a good looking, it's a good book, and I think it's going to have a good future.
I think so too. I mean, I have looked and seen that both of your books have gotten excellent reviews
Thank
online.
you.
So, congratulations on that. So, I have two final questions for you, and these are for bonus points, okay?
Okay, bonus points.
Okay. The first of your bonus point questions is, what does Newfoundland mean to you?
Oh my God, family. It's just loving cousins, loving, happy times, happy childhood, family, happy childhood, loving times. That's what Newfoundland means to me. That's a great place to go, and I would say anybody who wants to vacation, that's a great place to go.
Okay, I will definitely keep that in mind. And your last question for bonus points is, what was your favorite thing about writing Hannah, the Lighthouse Girl of Newfoundland?
I had to talk to cousins. I had to research. My mother had passed away when I wrote Hannah, probably about 5 years earlier. I love my mom dearly, and it made me revisit her and bring back some very warm, fuzzy memories. I had to go through some old pictures, some old files and papers that the family had, and it meant a whole lot to me that I was able to reconnect with mom. I wish she was alive today so she could see this book. She would be so happy that I wrote it.
I'm sure she would. And even as you're saying that, and I thought it as I was reading the book too, there, I can see it. I'm sure a lot of people, I think you and I are probably are in the same general age.
I'm 60.
And
I'm 70. I'm 70. I'm sorry. Good.
I'm 69, so
Okay,
we're,
I'm
we're
70.
pretty close.
I
Yeah.
just had a birthday last week. See,
Oh, congratulations.
think
Yeah, I'll be
I'll forget that.
70. I'll be 70 next year. But so same generation, and my mother grew up near Boston in a suburb, one of 11 kids, although four died in childhood, and very poor when she was young, and the father wasn't there a lot of the time. It was a tough childhood. She didn't become a lighthouse family, but I could see reflections of my family's experience in there, and I think a lot of people would see that. So again, Don, congratulations on both of your books.
Thank you.
And I can't recommend highly enough to Lighthouse people. Of course, this is a Lighthouse podcast, and most people listening are Lighthouse buffs to some degree. And I know that they would enjoy it. So I highly recommend Hannah, the Lighthouse Girl of Newfoundland, to
Thank
our
you.
listeners. Don Ladolcetta, thank you again so much, and I hope we can stay in touch and talk again in the future. Thank you, Don.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure, and I hope you have a great and wonderful day.
Hannah, the Lighthouse Girl of Newfoundland, and also Dawn's second book, A Brooklyn Tale, are available on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, and ebook versions.
It was a real pleasure speaking with Don Ladolcetta, and I love the fact that this is kind of a companion piece to our last episode, where our guest was Therese Wolfel, whose book Our Guiding Light was about her own mother, who was a lighthouse keeper's daughter, just like Don. I recommend both books very highly. So, Sarah, any plans for the holiday season?
Well, it sounds like I have a little bit of reading to do, so that's exciting. Some of these books to catch up on, but for the holiday season, I'll probably just be heading home to kind of upstate Mid Hudson Valley, New York, to spend some time with my family. Bring my dog with me, and we'll just do some adventuring out there. But that's about it.
Mm-hmm. The Upper Hudson Valley sounds like a place you'd want to go to at Christmas time. I just imagine a little bit of snow, maybe some light snow falling, and it's really pretty around there.
It is. It's magical during the holidays.
So, speaking of the holiday time, speaking of December, I want to remind everyone that the deadline is December 15th for this year's U.S. Lighthouse Society Dance Off. This year, we're giving people the chance to dance to their choice of 25 different songs. And the winner will be picked during a special live New Year's Eve virtual event. You can go to uslhs.org and look under events for all the details. And I hope I'll see you dancing at a lighthouse this year, Sarah.
Well, I guess I have to add that to my plans as well.
Maybe you and Coda could dance at a lighthouse.
He's a good dancer. He is a good dancer.
Okay, well, I'm holding you to that. And also, Halloween is just a couple of weeks away as we speak. Do you have any plans for that?
Well, I suppose once I'm done with my dancing and reading list, I on Halloween, I'm working. I work part-time at a brewery, so I'm sure it'll be a fun night. It's always fun. People get dressed up and head out, so we'll probably have some cool themed drinks and things like that. That's what I'll be doing.
So this year we're not doing a new podcast episode related to Halloween, but next week, in these off weeks, recently I've been putting together what we call Lighthearted Light. These are re-edited older interviews. And next week there will be an edited version of an interview with Diana Stampler from a few years ago, where she talked about haunted lighthouses of Michigan. So people can listen to that next Sunday. And speaking of haunted lighthouses, I recently, just a couple of weeks ago, did a trip starting in Buffalo, New York, and west along Lake Erie. I visited the Fairport Harbor Lighthouse in Ohio, which an interview I did there will be in a future episode. But there's a famous ghost cat there, which is very interesting. Sarah, can you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Sure. In 1871, Captain Joseph Babcock was the keeper of Fairport Harbor Lighthouse. His wife was bedridden, and the captain gave her several cats to keep her company. After she died, most of the cats disappeared except for a gray cat. Years later, a curator was living in what had been the Babcock's living quarters. She reported seeing the ghost of a gray cat. She said she would see it skitter across the floor like it was playing, and one time she felt it jump onto her bed and felt like its weight was pressing against her.
Yeah, so there is more to the story, and I was quite surprised. I interviewed a couple of people there about the history of the lighthouse and everything, and it's a great lighthouse, and they have a little museum in the keeper's house. And after they talked about the cat ghost story, I walked into the other room to look at some of the exhibits, and right there in front of me was an exhibit that included the cat. What happened was, supposedly some years ago, a man was crawling like in the crawl space under the floor, uh, installing a new air conditioning system, and he had his head resting on something, and suddenly he looked to see what his head was resting on, and it was the cat. Because it had been under that floor for so many years in very, I guess, very dry conditions, it was kind of like desiccated and mummified. So this mummified cat is on display in the museum, and local school kids have named the cat Sentinel, and they write stories about him and stuff like that. So it's a little odd, but interesting. I don't think too many lighthouse museums have a ghost cat story and also a mummified cat on display. So that's the end of that story. On that note, speaking of lighthouses along Lake Erie, we'll be back with a new episode about Lorraine Harbor Lighthouse in Ohio in 2 weeks. So thanks again for co-hosting today, Sarah. It's good to have you back.
Great to be here. Hope to do more in the future. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So until next time, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, happy Halloween. Thanks so much for listening, and
keep a good light.
Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine.